What's up, Warriors, and welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Movement Podcast, Voice for the Voiceless. I am your host, Chris. Today is International Men's Day, and what that means to me is, it's just awareness of your brothers, your fathers, your grandfathers, and your friendly neighbor. If you see a man on the side of the street, or you see anybody that you visibly see is struggling or having a bad day, just smile at them. Ask them how they are. You'd be surprised in those powerful words when you ask somebody how they're doing. So today's guest, he is a fellow warrior, and apparently I met him before a couple months ago with my good friend Sean. He was on a wrestling podcast with us, and full circle, he ended up reaching out to me about the mental health podcast, and we're going to have him on today. He is a public speaker, a writer, and he is the CEO of a nonprofit called the Metta Association. Please help me welcome George. George, how you doing, my friend?
I'm blessed. How are you?
Good, man. Thank you so much for taking time out of your week to come on the podcast, man.
Sure, not a problem.
So share with us, our listeners, just a little bit about you.
Wow. I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. I now reside in the DFW. Went through a lot of trauma in my life. Went through addiction, bipolar disorder, childhood obesity, divorce trauma, childhood trauma, weight loss surgery. It's a lot in life, and custody battles and all that. All was living with bipolar disorder. And when I really began my recovery from the cocaine and from other things, I started to address my mental health. And I realized that I needed to address a lot of the trauma. It's a man that I went through that we were always taught never to address, never to talk about, stuff it
Right.
down. Once I started sort of unpack those things, I noticed it made it easier to navigate my recovery from addiction. So I kind of brought everything full circle to the point where right now, CEO and founder of Metta Association, public speaker. I also do many other things such as writing and producing. But everything that I do is for the purpose of increasing awareness about mental health, especially men's mental health. So that's my purpose. That's what I do. And that's pretty much where I come from.
Glad to hear it, man. And speaking from a man's perspective, I think we need to have these kind of conversations more. We
Right.
need to have more men speak up and speak out of the things that they go through, because we get updated statistics every single year, and we just, our jaws are on the floor because we see how many people are taking their life, and majority of those being men. Now, while I say to my listeners, everybody struggles, everybody goes through something,
Right.
but the conversation just is not 100% there with men. If it was, we wouldn't be having this conversation of men are still struggling in silence. We
Right.
wouldn't have to have these conversations of there needs to be more awareness. I mean, I have a statistic here that I found today, for men's or International Men's Day. 76% of suicides are men,
Right.
and I don't think people realize, like, yes, women attempt more,
Mhm.
but men unfortunately go through with it more.
Right.
And 85% of men are homeless. There are so many statistics that go against us as being men, and I feel like on this day specifically, no, year round as well. We
Mhm.
just need to hold that space for each other. We're not asking each other to sit there and cry to each other, because that's just, that's not what all of us do.
Right.
It's not in our DNA as men to just open up and cry all the time. But
Right.
sometimes you need that safe space, man. We can be that provider and protector for ourselves. And that's a
Right.
message that I feel is super important for every man and just every person in general to hear.
Yeah, and it has to be incumbent upon us to create those safe spaces for ourselves. I think a lot of times, especially as men, we kind of sit around and wait for somebody to do something for us in that regard, especially in areas that concern us regarding things that we aren't comfortable with, like our emotional and mental health. So a lot of times we'll sit around and wait on people to offer a solution or to offer a remedy instead of seeking our own solution, which is right now is a safe space for men where we can congregate and talk things out. That doesn't mean we're going to be up to swapping tissues, but at least it'll be a place where things can come out and get addressed and get a different perspective. to help facilitate some healing and some accountability with us men.
Absolutely. And that's another thing super important is accountability. I
Right.
feel we as men hold each other very accountable for our actions, but sometimes we don't hold ourselves accountable enough to the point of we need to do these things for this to change in our lives. You know,
Right.
whether it's recovery, whether it's going to therapy, whether it's having that hard conversation with that one person
Right.
and setting those boundaries. You know, so many of us put so much on our backs
Right.
and don't do anything to ever relieve that tension.
Because people don't realize how much pressure we as men have on us. You know, I'm not a misogynist at all, and I know that women go through a lot, but I think that men are starting to understand that the issues we deal with are unique. We have issues to provide, we have issues to be leaders and all that, but yet and still, how can you do that when you're not addressing the most important part of yourself, which is your mental and emotional health?
Right.
So, considering that we have not we haven't failed to address those issues, is there any wonder why men having such a difficult time nowadays leading, filling traditional gender roles, which is changing anyway, and navigating all those things in this changing world? And I think you saw with this past election, I think you saw more of a vocal standing from men saying, "Hey, you know, we have issues too, especially with black men in this election. We were very vocal." So I think you're starting to see a culture where men we are starting to speak more, congregate more, do things to help ourselves. Who knows what that's going to look like long term? But I'm glad it's something that we're doing now.
Yeah. And you add social media as a really big factor in that too, right? I always view like Men's Mental Health Month or Mental Health Awareness Month as more than just a hashtag, and I feel very strongly on those words because it's not. I don't think things should be delegated to a month. We should be having this conversation year round, not because oh well today is this day, so we're going to talk about it only on this day. You know what I mean?
Well,
Um,
we live in a society where everyone gets their own special lobby. You know,
yeah,
if you're LGBTQ, you got your own group, got your own day. Everybody's
right,
got a day. But like
right.
you said, it's what do we do the other 364 days of the year?
Hmm.
You know, that's the thing. That's where we have to build consistency. And days like this help because they may get people looking in a certain direction. But at some point, when the day is over with, you have to keep those same notions and those same policies and protocols going for yourself to ensure your own mental and emotional well being.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, a day is just a day, but it needs to be more of a notion than just a day.
Agreed. And not to focus on it all because I know election time is very divisive with a lot of people, but
Mm-hmm.
I noticed something that was going around on social media really heavy among universities, and they were offering mental health resources for people that were upset about election time, and
Right.
I got really upset, and not because of whatever results or anything, but I'm just sitting here stirring on it for a good 5-10 minutes and like, okay, so why can't we have the same conversation when it comes to men? Like, men are taking their lives at an alarming rate.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that not a conversation? But mental health resources are being touted for people about an election result. Like, I was genuinely upset about that.
Yeah, it's a
You
matter of
know?
priorities. People really don't. I mean, if you're a man, Chris Rock had a quote, and people argue with me about this, but I think it's true. He said something to effect, and I'll try to paraphrase as best I can. He said that women and children have an intrinsic value. They have value no matter what, regardless of what they do or their standing. They have value. But a man only has value once he's providing something for someone. And I saw that, and it stuck with me because so much of our value is based on our net worth, what money we
Right,
have, what we can do for somebody. But as far as us as men, we really don't hold any value.
right,
So it's really incumbent upon us to try to heal ourselves because if we're sitting around waiting for other people to do it, it ain't happening. We can't wait on the government to institute programs to help us. We got to do it ourselves. We can't wait on our women, our children to come to us and help us navigate what we need. We have to do it ourselves. And that's just the way we are right now. And that's where we need to keep pushing and keep going.
yeah, I completely agree, and that's one of my favorite quotes by him too, because I've never agreed with something so much in my life because people can roll their eyes every time we talk about how much men are shamed, men aren't prioritized in any fashion, but it's the truth. Women
Right.
are very encouraged to talk about mental health. When
Right.
we talk about it, it's just kind of like, oh well, you're not a real man because you're going to therapy. You're not a real man because you're in recovery. You know what I mean? Like, and it's a weird conversation, and I don't know why in 2024 it's still like this.
Right.
I feel like the culture is progressing, but I feel like every two steps we take, we go five steps back.
Yeah. Because a lot of the powers that be are too busy catering to other groups
This is
to
true.
deal with us. So they, I don't want to get too political, but we know what other groups have been propped up the past couple of administrations. You know, not at the expense necessarily, but maybe at the exclusion of other groups, core groups that needed care, that need help. So it's a matter. A lot of the care you get is a popularity contest. It's whatever popular. It's what's on social media. That's what gets the most attention. Where real issues get ignored and neglected.
Yeah. And it doesn't help that the algorithm pushes back real issues too. I have noticed that.
Right. I
Um,
noticed too about the election, man. The media is real. There's a real strong bias in the media,
mhm.
and that's why I don't watch the news. I try to deal with people on an individual level and live
Same.
life instead of relying on social media and the media to shape my whole idea of this world that we live in. And when you get into involved in the media and social media, it really does become a drain on your mental health. The funny thing is, you're draining your mental health with something that really has nothing to do with you. That's not your personal life. It's social media. It's the news. It's entertainment. It's fickle. It's not real.
Right.
But we predicate so much of our own personal well-being and our own happiness based on something that's really just not even there.
Yeah.
We have to stop doing that and base our lives on actual existence, on actual interactions with people, on real
Right.
tangible things so we can have something to heal with.
Yeah, and we saw that lack of interaction and what that did to the entire world when the pandemic was going on.
Right.
It's,
Right.
we were so cut off from each other that when we got out of it, it was just conversations face to face were really weird. Uh,
Right.
I remember I went to a concert right when the restrictions were coming off. I mean, Florida wasn't really ever too strict, but they were still there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was all standing room where we went, and they're like, "Oh, you can't come in unless you're wearing a mask." I got a big ass burly beard, so I'm wearing a mask with a beard and surrounded by at least a couple hundred bodies. People are taking off their masks and listening to that media in the back of your head, be like, "Oh, well, you're gonna catch something. You take off that mask, and you get that anxiety and everything." And man, they did a really good job at manipulating people into thinking a
Right.
certain way. And like you said, the media bias and them pulling the strings for everybody. It's a crazy culture, man. I try my best to stay away from the news and anything that's going on because it is very, very draining. And it's, like you said, it's not your personal life, it's social media, it's the news, it's, you know, things of that nature.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, so let's get in a little bit into your journey. So you had mentioned that your struggles kind of started at a pretty young age.
Mhm.
Tell us what you struggled with being so young, and what inspired you to start helping people once you, I guess, started getting into that healing journey.
Right. Well, my bipolar symptoms really kicked in about age 7. And one thing that helped is, even though I grew up in a two-parent black family and a black household, unlike many of my peers, my parents believed in getting help. They weren't old school. They didn't believe in just praying it away. They say that you need your medicine, you need your medicine, you need therapy, you need therapy. So they helped me out a lot in my life. And once I went through my recovery about 6 years ago and got off the cocaine, kicked that, and started addressing my physical and mental health, I said I haven't gone through this from age 7 for no reason. So the best thing for me to do is try to use what I've been through and show my scars to the world in the hopes that it'll help them heal. That's why I do the public speaking. That's why I do the advocacy work. That's why I do the podcast, spreading awareness, getting the word out. I just started returning back to school to finish up my master's in psychology. So I'm working on several things, all in the point of trying to help people. But at the same level, I got to eat too. So it's kind of funny trying to find that balance fiduciarily and as far in terms of your purpose. How can I live my purpose? How can I do the noble thing, the right thing for myself? But I got to eat too. So that that's an interesting journey, but I'm still doing it. I'm still on this journey, and I'm trying to bring people on with me in a way to show them, hey, there is hope. There are ways that you can fortify yourself, regardless of whatever mental or emotional issue you're dealing with, or whatever situation you're dealing with.
Yeah, and I feel like the hardest part of all that is finding that balance.
Right,
Finding that line to walk between, okay, you got to eat, but you want to chase your passion at the same time. And I feel that's what a lot of people struggle with,
right,
going through school and working and then trying to find our purpose. We're trying to juggle and we're not walking that straight line. We're over here and we're over here. So talk about how important that balance was for you when you started working, when you started chasing your passion in the mental health field.
I'm still on that journey to find my balance. There's something that's ever changing, because one thing that I realize is that no matter, even if I find a sense of balance personally, where everything's kind of going okay, I'm still gonna have to deal with external factors and external stimuli of life. It's like trying to walk a tightrope blindfolded. That's hard enough as it is, but now you got somebody throwing something at you while you're up there, and that's just life. That balance is going to change. Your routine is going to change. Things are going to shift. So it's really more so a matter of, even more so than having balance, being adaptable, because
Right,
life is going to throw things at you. How we react, how we pivot, how we absorb those things really affects our mental health.
right.
So we just have to learn to be adaptable, have to learn to accept change, have to learn to process our emotions. I'm an advocate for therapy. I've been in therapy 6 years, had therapy a couple hours ago. Helps. So I'm an advocate for that. But you have to do things and put things in place to find balance for yourself. And you can try, but just know that things are going to come at you. Life is going to come at you.
Yeah.
And if you have a diagnosed mental illness, you got to deal with that too. So, you can stay prayerful about it, do the best you can, try to live the best life you can. But you have to develop coping mechanisms. You have to make sure you're doing all those other things that are part of recovery, such as being around the right people, being in the right environment, eating the right things, taking your medicine, doing your therapy. And through all of that, maybe you can find some semblance of balance, but just don't count on it. Just kind of roll with it.
Yeah.
Everything changes. Just be ready to change with it.
So let's talk about therapy a little bit because I
Mhm.
feel I'm a really big advocate in therapy myself. I believe this is my fifth year going on therapy now. Um, so what does therapy mean for you? As both a man, mental health advocate, and just your healing journey. What has it meant for you as a man? What has therapy done for you?
Okay. As a man and as a person, what it has done is given me great clarity as far as navigating a lot of my trauma and my issues. I'm talking to a licensed professional. I'm doing it on a regular basis. It means that even when I'm dealing with the stresses of life, I know that I have a therapist there to help me navigate these issues and consult with me on things, as far as my coping, as far as my relationships, as far as what I do. Now, that's just part of my recovery, but it's an important part. And you have to use therapy in conjunction with your medication, with a holistic approach, all those things to manage your mental illness and emotional wellness. But therapy for me has been wonderful. It's a lot of work, because when you're in therapy, you just don't go for 30 minutes a week and talk. You have to do homework. You have to be invested. You have to put the work in to have it be beneficial to you. And it's not easy. So that's what therapy is. Therapy has been a godsend to me. I'm an advocate for therapy. I'm gonna get a T-shirt that says everybody needs therapy, but it's been a godsend to me, and it's meant so much that now I'm pursuing it as a career.
I'm really glad that you mentioned both the medicine part and going to therapy because I feel like so many psychiatrists out there who aren't as passionate about the mental health field as you and I are will just give people their medicine and just call it a day, not say, hey, I want to suggest you do therapy with this because the medicine's only going to help you for so long, and then your problems are right back there to meet you there. So.
Right.
Um, I think it's very important to mention that medicine and therapy should go hand in hand with each other for sure.
Right. And to change their culture is going to take people like me that have lived with the mental illness and all these other extemporaneous circumstances all my life to come out and speak about it, because there are probably people out there that will look at my story and be like, man, I'm not dealing with a tenth of that. So what can I do?
Right.
So that's a lot of my purpose, to get people to realize that things are possible, that you're not relegated to death because you have a diagnosis. You're not relegated to living in poverty because you have a diagnosis. You can have your diagnosis, manage it, and live with it, and still thrive.
Right. And the important part of the diagnosis is I feel like so many people try to self-diagnose and be like, oh well, that's what I have, that's what I think I have, and not really get to the root of what's causing them to feel this way or find out exactly what the diagnosis is. And I feel like it would be so beneficial for people to get that official diagnosis first. That way, once you get that, you can chase down the root cause of what they're struggling with.
Right. And what I tell people when they're going through something emotionally or mentally, I tell them, one of the first things you do, you go to your PCP, you go to your physician, you get a physical also, and you speak to a therapist and psychiatrist, because the underlying issue may be a physical one, or maybe an underlying physical issue that could be manifesting itself in a way that looks like mental or emotional illness. Plus, it's just good.
Right.
I mean, your health is not just mental or physical; it's total, it's whole. And I think we need to start treating ourselves like that. We need to start treating our mental illness like we do our diabetes. I'm a type 1 diabetic and a heart failure patient. I know if I don't take my heart medicine, I'm going to have problems. Just like I know if I don't take my psych meds, I'm going to have problems. If I don't go to therapy, I'm going to have problems. So it's a matter of doing what I have to do to keep myself healthy so I can be the best I can be.
Right. So you had mentioned that you started a nonprofit called the Metta Association. So tell us a little bit about that and how that came to be a reality for you.
Right. Well, I was looking at my purpose during my recovery, July 18th, 2018, at my home in Memphis at the time. And I was asking for my purpose. I was thinking about my purpose. I said, okay, I'm on the path to recovery. Now I need a purpose. I need something to follow. And Metta Association just came to my mind. I said, I need to start a nonprofit. And we promote healthy fatherhood. We promote fighting recidivism. And we promote men's mental health. And we address Black men's mental health. We address all men's mental health, but as a diaspora, we have our own issues. So that's something I'm passionate about. I do a lot of public speaking. We've done community events over the years. We survived the pandemic. We're doing a lot of networking. Right now, it seems like a lot of the people that I would collaborate with are starting to get active, which has been a problem the past couple of years, because it seems like everybody I know has been going through it financially and otherwise. But now everybody's kind of getting on one board. Things are getting started. So I'm hoping that in 2025, we really get to kick some doors in and spread some awareness and then get some discussions going and really facilitate some people getting some healing.
So what would you say is your main goal to for your nonprofit? Would you say that you just kind of want it to go nationally, or just keep it local, or what would you say is your main goal for it?
Well, I've gotten calls from all over the world regarding my nonprofit, and it's going pretty well. But in terms of my nonprofit, I'm looking to become bigger, to expand. We already have been, all over the world in terms of of people we've dealt with. I'm looking to secure the nonprofit financially. I've got my board of directors in place, add some staff, expand, get some office space, and do some things in the first year, and around the first of the year, to really solidify our mission and get us going in the right direction.
Right. Yeah, I think it's super important to invest in local nonprofits, or just any nonprofits that people know of, because most of them, if not all of them, have a very noble cause behind them. And
Right.
you know I feel it's one of those conversations that, at least I remember, like the early 2010s, a lot of them were starting to come out. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the nonprofit, To Write Love in Her Arms.
Mm-hmm.
They were really big in like Warp Tour. They were there like every single year,
Right.
and I remember them being touted like everywhere that you possibly look, MySpace and Facebook, when it was still fairly new. Um, I would love to see social media pick up nonprofit advertising a lot more, because I feel in this just world of muck and constant negativity, we need more things like what you're doing. We need more nonprofits in this community that aren't in it for their own pocket. Just genuinely trying to help each other, help others.
And one big thing that helps is donations. I haven't gotten a grant since I've had this. I've been funding this out of pocket, so we're at a point where we're going to be looking for donations. We have a fund drive on CashApp that goes for infrastructure. It doesn't even go to pay me. I'm not taking a salary from this. since I've been doing it. But it goes toward things like Wi-Fi, things, infrastructure for meetings. So those are a lot of things that nonprofit needs too, because people don't. A lot of times people forget that a nonprofit is still a business. We still have to do a P&L sheet. We still have to do those things. So while our mission and our calling is altruistic, we're still capitalists. So that's another part of it. So when people think about nonprofits and philanthropic organizations, understand they have to keep the doors open too. And that little $20 you can throw their way goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for my listeners, I'll drop the link in here whenever this is posted, just to help George and the nonprofit out. So what kind of programs does Metta Associations have? Like, I know you were talking about you guys promote strong fatherhood and you're really big in the Black community as well. So what kind of programs does your nonprofit have?
Well, right now we're working on a national drug prevention program for young boys around 13, 14. Uh, in my collaboration, I've noticed that's the age a lot of young men really kind of go one way or the other a lot of way at times. So we're working on a program for that. I'm a mentor for a school district here in Dallas. I run their mentoring program for them. I do a lot of public speaking. I'm available to speak at churches, schools, universities, wherever. We've done food drives during the pandemic. We were able to do a really big food drive during the pandemic to help people out. And we just collaborate. We collaborate with other nonprofits. Right now, I'm in the talks with several people to do some events. I just posted one I'm doing earlier. So I'm trying to spread awareness. I'm going to be doing some workshops and some things like that. So we try to, and maybe it's not the best thing for me running a nonprofit, but I tend to kind of want to put my hands in everything. Anything that I think will help. So there's no telling what you may have us doing. I mean, we're focused, but we try to be broad enough to try to help as many people as possible.
Yeah, I feel like the most important part of what we do, man, is networking anywhere we can, trying new things. And I've done a panel for NAMI. I've written a couple articles for my job at a global resources level.
Mhm.
Um, I feel it's important to have your hands anywhere that you can put them and be comfortable. Um, Taking risks is basically what we do every single day with this community. Every interaction we have with people, could be something trivial, could be something game changing. That one conversation could change everything in your life. You
That's
know,
true.
and I feel so many people that are wanting to become an advocate don't understand that there's a lot of risk taking. Um, there's a lot of different people that you can reach out to and go a lot of different routes. And nonprofit is, it's a hard spot to attain, especially if you're not financially able to begin it. But there's speaking events like when you do your public speaking. I'm assuming it's through your nonprofit, or is it just kind of like you're representing yourself and that's just your.
So it depends on the subject matter and the venue, but I do both. Usually I'm known as CEO and founder of Metta Association, so that pretty much follows me everywhere. So I feel like even when I do things personally, I'm still representing my nonprofit and our mission. So that's a constant.
So when you're doing your any public event, whether it's for the Black community, whether it's for your nonprofit, fatherhood, whatever the topic may be, what is the main message that you try to get out of your public speaking events?
Hope. Let people know there's hope no matter what you're going through. Excuse me. There's always hope and patience, and be patient with yourself. Healing takes time. When you have a wound, sometimes it's painful. The healing process, the scabbing over, is painful. But we have to heal those emotional and those psychological wounds, at least to the point where we can continue on and function with them without hurting ourselves or other people. But that takes a lot of patience. That takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of tears. It takes a lot, but you need to try to do it to give yourself the best life that you can. So just be patient with yourself.
Right. And you having that support system with your parents, encouraging you to get that help. How supportive were they, like, during like your healing journey? I don't know if the
They,
trauma was with
yeah,
them
it,
or.
it, it was because I'm estranged from my family. I haven't spoken to them
Yeah.
in 7 years. My parents are deceased. So, I
Oh,
mean,
I'm
if nothing
sorry.
else,
Sorry.
yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, if nothing else, it gave me a good foundation for kind of how to approach my mental health and not feel like the one thing that it gave me, they never made me feel as though it was something that I should be ashamed of. It was like, this is part of who you are. Just deal with it. It's no different than my diabetes. It's no different than my skin color. It's just part of who I am. So I have to learn to adapt to it and not let it be a hindrance. And I choose not to let it be a hindrance for other people either.
Yeah. Um, so you had mentioned that you were in recovery.
Mhm.
Um, what do you feel was the hardest part of your recovery journey?
Not letting external factors in life put you back in that mindset where you're prompted to use. It hadn't really been the addiction. I have not relapsed in 7 years this February. I have not thought about relapsing. But the thing is that when you don't learn those coping mechanisms and deal with those other things in life, the family issues, the economic issues, the social issues, it can put you in a place where you could be more apt to relapse. So that's been the hardest part, is keeping my mind clean,
Yeah.
keeping things right so I don't fall back into old trappings of habits, not just addiction, but other negative habits that I had at the time that would manifest themselves because of my mental illness. So I had to kind of get over those as well. But
And,
it's just not just protecting my peace, just doing the best I can on that.
yeah. And I feel like a lot of people, when it comes to addiction, just don't understand what all that entails. That addiction goes into other bad habits that it's not necessarily substance.
Right.
And I feel so many people don't fully understand that when they're judging an addict. I grew up with two addict parents. My
Mm-hmm.
mom's substance, my dad alcohol. So it was one of those things where I went to NA meetings with my mom, and while I was young and didn't really fully understand all the conversations being had, as I got older and realized that she was just there to meet other people to continue that addiction, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as I got older and started to try and understand, the addiction conversation, it's is it a disease or is it a choice? And I would love to hear your thoughts on whether do you think it's a disease or a choice?
I think it's a choice. I mean, because I can't think of any particular psychopathy other than trauma that led to my addiction because I chose. You got to understand something about addiction, and you just alluded to this point. When you're an addict, you don't just get high off drugs. You get high off making a call. You get high off meeting the guy. You get high off getting with it. It's everything. It becomes so ritualistic. The whole thing you're addicted to. But and people don't understand that there's a lot of habit to break with addiction. But it's not just a substance; it becomes a lifestyle. It becomes a warm blanket for you because when life gets hard, you got that drug to turn to, and to deal with that is jarring. I had weight loss surgery. My whole attitude toward the way I dress food had to change. I could no longer run the food to cope anymore. That screwed my head up for a while. So, that's one thing that people that never live with addiction can't understand. And I've talked to the addicts, and we can joke about stuff. I joke about my addiction, and there's parts of it that are funny, not because I'm making light of it, just because this is part of my story. It's no
Yeah,
different, And I think people that aren't addicts get intimidated, get scared when addicts come around because there's already that notion of, well, you're only 2 seconds away from snorting again, or they're just uncomfortable with it. They don't understand it. But that's why I do what I do. That's why I talk so much about it because I realize more people are dealing with it than what we realize.
yeah,
And it's a problem.
yeah.
And the root of the addiction is nothing but the response to unresolved trauma. That's all it is.
Right. And one of the things that we noticed during the pandemic was the amount of overdoses that were
Right.
happening. And that was really eye-opening to realize, like, man, there's a lot of people that are struggling that weren't none of us were prepared for the pandemic, but
Right.
just how that whole thing was handled just completely destroyed people's way of just functioning.
Yes.
Um, so you had mentioned coping a little bit earlier when we started talking about the addiction part.
Mhm.
What does self care look like for you now that you're in a better mind space? Do you ever find yourself, I guess, kind of not slipping, but just kind of like feeling off? What does self care look like for you if you start having those off days?
Well, when you're bipolar, even if you're on medication, in therapy, and doing all the right things, you're still going to cycle. So there may be a period where I may just cycle really down for 2 days and just crash. What I try to do is I set my life up to where if I need 2 days, I can take 2 days and recover and rest and eat and sleep and take my medicine and bounce back. That's just part of my illness. So that's one way I cope. I try to build healthy relationships. I try to be around positive things. I try to really watch what I consume media wise. I watch my wrestling. I do my gaming. I'm an anime fan. I'm a huge Batman fan. I get involved in all that kind of stuff. I love music. Just saw Green Day a couple months ago, about a month ago, with my son. So I try to make time to do things I enjoy and step away from the monotony of life and the stress of life. But a lot of us don't know how to turn off.
Yeah.
Yeah. These things
So
are going to kill us because
yeah,
these things are constantly on. So I kind of learned how to toss that aside for a while and
right.
just detach and disconnect and give myself room to breathe.
Yeah, and unplugging is so important, man.
Right.
I've found that being in this community has been, wonderful. I've met some incredible people like yourself.
Thank you.
And feel like sometimes you're beating your head against the wall because you're creating content and you're not getting the support that you feel you should be getting. You're struggling to get guests on your podcast, whatever the case may be. Um, I feel that social media has warped our way of thinking where numbers matter, even though in reality, this podcast, whether it reaches one person or whether it reaches 1,000 people, that one person is going to listen, and it might impact him, it might not.
Right.
And that's what we're doing. That's what we're here to do is impact that one life. And I had to constantly drill that into my head after several conversations with my therapist, and um, just kind of like, am I not doing enough? Like, I'm not. The growing has stopped. I'm 2 years in. The growing has kind of not flatlined, but it's staying where it's staying.
Yeah.
And she's like, the way that you got to look at just the content in general is the people that are listening. It's helping. And
Right.
the person that might listen, the one person opposed to the 60 last week, that one person might get more out of it than those 60 people did.
That's right. That's right.
And I feel it's so hard for us to remind ourselves of that, of
Mhm.
what we're doing is just such a really good and positive thing because, like you said, well, as men, we struggle with our self-worth. We struggle with the impact that we're supposed to make, our value, as we alluded to earlier.
True. True. So true. So true. Yeah, it's a journey, and it's going to be, it's something I'm trying to impart to my sons about being young men and my daughters as well about, everyone taking care of their mental health. But I got to deal with home first. I'm a man first before I'm
Yeah.
anything. So I got to deal with that. But I work with several women's groups. I've spoken on several women's events. I believe in supporting and fortifying women as well. I think that once we as men begin to really see some healing and some transition in our thinking, it'll improve our relationships with our women, with our families, with our communities, and in terms of our economic status.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's great that there are so many women's groups out there that are willing to open that space for men to be able
Right.
to speak on men's mental health. I had to reach out to this young lady named Ivy, who's got a fairly big following on her podcast. She's like, we're geared more towards women, but we would love to have you on for Men's Mental Health Month in June of next year because that conversation needs to be had. And it's like, I can appreciate you being geared towards more women or more men, whatever the case may be. But I feel like we should stop doing the only that side and only
Right.
this side thing. And I get it. Some people are more comfortable with men, some more people are more comfortable with women. I totally understand that. But until we can have that conversation together,
Right.
we're not going to make any changes, man.
Right.
You
We may
know?
not be ready yet, though, because I think I don't know. I just noticed like this past election, things are really divisive for men and women right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the thing we got to fix. And hopefully, we don't let the media and those in power keep dividing us and doing things to segregate us because it's not helping us.
Right.
But the thing is, separation is profitable.
Yeah.
Discontent is profitable.
That's true.
They're gonna make more money off keeping people miserable than trying to help them. So we just
Right.
have to keep that in mind too.
Right. And the crazy part of that too, if it's not the race, it's the gender. If it's not the gender,
Right.
it's a specific group.
Yeah.
And it's so heartbreaking to see, man, because my mentality going into this whole thing was like, man, I don't care who you voted for. I don't.
Right.
I genuinely don't. I said,
Hmm.
if you're a good person to me, I'm going to be a good person to you.
True.
And whatever your values are, whatever your beliefs are, as long as we treat each other with respect, I'm good, man. And I
Right.
feel like more people need to have that mentality. 20 years ago, we didn't have conversations about who you voted for. People didn't give a shit.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, well, how the hell did we change that much in 20 years? Like, it's ridiculous to me thinking about it.
We've become a pettier, more infantile society as
Yeah.
people.
Yeah,
We've
I
lost a lot
completely
of
agree.
maturity.
Hmm.
There's a real lack of emotional maturity in this country.
Yeah, I
Uh,
completely agree.
so I think that's a big part of it. Now it's all me, and everybody has to be a special designation. Just be a human and shut up.
Yeah. The main character energy, as we love to call it in this community, is
Right,
insane.
right.
Um, so, we kind of talked about towards the beginning, just how important the conversation as men is to talk about mental health. So, being a man growing up in the time that you and I did, we were told we were told to not talk about our struggles, just rub dirt in it and to be strong. Tell us what your view on mental health is right now, as you could share your story in 2024. What does mental health mean to you now that you're able to share your story?
I'm seeing that we need to treat mental health almost like a triage. We got people out there really hurting right now, and it needs to be almost like a mass unit in terms of mental health. That's really what we need in this country. And I base that on my observations, my work as an advocate, and otherwise. So we got a lot of people out here that are hurting, and they're the walking wounded. But we got to give them the triage and got to try to stop the bleeding and get people to help themselves. Because we're losing people. People are taking their lives. They're taking other people's lives. Their quality of life is lacking. All because we continue to hold on to the notion that men should not be dealing with their mental health or emotional health. That somehow is a character flaw. That
Right.
somehow makes you weak. It's not that. It's just something you got to deal with.
So do you think, so as a father, do you believe that being the provider and the protector, and you could also have that emotional intelligence, you believe that that can be one and the same thing and still keep that masculinity? Like, I feel that it's more manly to talk about what we're going through than it
Right.
is to keep it to ourselves.
Right. But the thing is, we live in an American society where that's not the notion. We're still on that macho bullshit. And it's not really not doing us any good. I'm not dealing with it, or they're going through something. I don't need to talk about it. Okay. I mean, and that's the reason why too so many men die from physical issues because I've been sick a year, but I'm not going to the doctor. I don't have to. I mean, just instead of making excuses and being cowards for not dealing with their mental illness, and I think this is what it is. It's a matter of cowardice more so than it is an issue of awareness or anything else.
Yeah.
Accountability is scary because you have to look in the mirror and say, okay, if I want to hold everybody else accountable, I got to start with me and look at what I did. So accountability itself is scary, but a lot of guys are just cowards.
Yeah.
This is what it is. They don't
Yeah.
want to talk about it. They don't want to deal with it. They think they're okay, and they're not.
Yeah. I one of my dad's friends took his life, and I remember how he reacted. He just kind of didn't know how to react because he grew up in that generation of just not, oh, he was struggling. Damn, I didn't know he was struggling kind of mentality. And he's in his 50s now, so I can only imagine just like how they were in school and how they dealt with their parents getting divorced and shit like that. Because it's like they had to keep all that stuff to themselves, man. And I know I can't talk about mental health stuff with him because it's in one ear and out the other. It's
Right,
like you said, he doesn't go to the doctor. He doesn't believe in therapy. He doesn't believe in none of that.
right.
Um, and I feel like it's definitely a really big generational
It
thing for
is.
some reason, that there's that whole group of men, quite a bit of men still, that just feel they can tough through it. And then when the going gets bad, it's like, well, shit, where are the people for me? Oh, I pushed them away because I said their feelings don't matter. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
And that's kind of the kind of person my dad is. That emotional intelligence just doesn't exist.
Right. And it's, I think the same. My father said a lot. I could say the same for his generation, but I think Gen X is different. I'm a Gen Xer. 46, and I think our generation came in a little bit different. Um, for a myriad of reasons, but I think we're more attuned to therapy. I think that's why our kids, the millennials, are more so into therapy, And I think we went too far with them, but they're more in touch with their emotions.
Yeah.
Maybe too much, but at least they're talking.
Right.
Whereas my parents didn't even do it at all. So maybe maybe this will be a generational thing where in a couple of years we'll kind of have a system or people kind of have a good way of dealing with it, dealing with mental illness, dealing with going to the hospital. Where if you have to go inpatient, you're not seen as a Looney Tune, you're not seen as crazy, you're just seen as someone sick.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that you try to tell your kids that it's okay to talk about their things. So would you say that's the number one message you try to preach to them all the time, that it's okay basically not to be okay?
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely. I ask my kids, my kids may ask me, "You okay today?" I'm like, "Nope, I'm not having a good day. I got this going on, I got that going on, but I'm trying to persevere." Just little things like that. Just letting somebody know you're not having a good day can make a big difference because they'll check on you.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's all you need is someone to act like to care. Because
Yeah.
I never ask someone what's going on if I come across a person in distress because I'm mental health first aid certified. So I respond to certain things when they happen. First thing I ask someone is, "How are you feeling? How are you feeling? What's going on? How are you feeling?" Not what's wrong. Don't ask somebody what's wrong because they automatically feel like, "Well, I must be doing something wrong." No, what are you
Yeah.
feeling?
Right.
So it's ways to be more compassionate, and compassion can go a long way. But we just have to be measuring who we hand our compassion out to.
Right.
And
Right.
my son told me when it was 7, he said, "Dad, everybody doesn't deserve your compassion." I'm like, "You might be right,"
Wow.
because when I doled it out, just freely, it just left me depleted. But now another way I've learned to cope is I've learned to to understand who deserves that extra effort. What things I'm doing deserve the extra push, and when do I need to pull back and maybe take a day and rest myself. It's very much a matter of pacing. It's
Yeah.
very much a matter of routine. So just anything that I say today, these are things I actually use on a daily basis to heal myself. So I'm not saying it's going to work for you, but it's something. In a lot of ways, my testimony is all I have to offer, and it's just my way of doing it.
Yeah, and you mentioned something really really important there that I wanted to pull out of that was language being very important. Not saying what's wrong is, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, man, saying how are you versus what's wrong or what happened or what's going on now kind of thing. And I
Mm,
feel that so many people don't really understand how to talk to people, how to be there for people,
right.
and um, it's super hard to maintain relationships when you don't know how to talk to people properly.
Right. And that's something we have to learn. And as men, we aren't taught that.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of our recovery is learning how to communicate. That's something I still sometimes have an issue with. But we aren't taught to communicate. We aren't taught to emote properly. We aren't taught to convey our feelings and thoughts in a way that where we can really articulate what's going on with us.
Right.
So that's been a big thing. Another thing is the reason why a lot of men don't pursue their mental and emotional health more so is because a lot of times once you expose that you are vulnerable or something going on, people weaponize that against you at times. How many, I can tell you how many times I've heard stories of guys that confided in their mate, confided in their wife and their girlfriend. And when they get into an argument, she just weaponized it against them and it just totally turned them off toward everything.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful, how we talk to people, but how we react to things.
Boundaries.
Yeah, boundaries. Boundaries are huge. Now I've learned boundaries. Yeah, we can do a whole different show on boundaries, but we have to learn how to communicate. We have to try to learn to be active listeners and not listen for response and do all those little things. It just
Yeah.
takes years.
Yeah.
Recovery is not something you'll ever be done with. You will
Right.
always be in recovery,
Right.
and people have to accept that. I don't call myself a former addict. I still have that same not habit, but it's something as an addict that remains with you. So I will always say I'm an addict.
Right.
I'm not using. So it's just a lot of work to do. It's a lot of work to do, and we got a lot on our plate. And
And you got to be willing to do that work too.
Yeah, you got to be willing to do it because it ain't gonna happen for you. I mean, if you're in
Right.
therapy, if you're in therapy and you're doing therapy right, you're doing homework. You're doing
Yeah.
those extra things.
Yeah.
If you're going to the doctor, taking care of your physical health, you're taking your medicine. You're doing all those things you have to do. But people can't sit on their ass and not do anything, and then wonder why their life is like it is. At
Hmm.
some point, you have to take responsibility for your life, especially if you have a mental illness, because no one can treat that but you.
Right. Right.
And,
So,
and and that's if you're lucky enough to be cognitive enough where you have a mental illness. There are people with mental illnesses that really can't, but if you
sure.
can, do the best you can.
Yeah. So I like to ask all my guests this question before we wrap up the podcast. If you could change one thing in the mental health community, what would it be?
The stigma.
Yeah.
The stigma gets in a lot of ways. It gets in our way a lot. And if I didn't have that barrier that people have up when I initially talk to them, I think it would go a long way. But we still live in a country, especially in the black community, where if you have a mental illness, it's seen as a defect, a character flaw. So we got a long way to go. But if I could just help chip away at this stigma, I think we get a lot more people help.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, and this question is just for me. Who's your favorite wrestler of all time?
Wow. Okay. I'm from Memphis. I grew up on Memphis wrestling, so I'm a big Lawler fan. It depends on in ring, but in all, I think, of course, I don't know. I can't pick one. I can't pick just one because, like my mood, like the matches I watch, it depends on my mood. Like I may watch some stuff from Japan, some old J Cup stuff tonight. Then again, I might watch some Memphis wrestling. So my favorite, I'm sort of like I'm as far as favorite wrestlers, I'm pretty promiscuous on that. But huge Lawler fan, huge Flair fan. Um, um, Grew up in Memphis on Memphis wrestling, watching NWA. We really didn't do WWE that much, or WWF that much in Memphis, but I just love it. I loved working in the industry. If anybody's looking to hire a booker, I'm here. I'm available. I'm cheap, but I'm good. Um, Man, favorite wrestler. I don't know. Who am I going to watch tonight? I want to watch some Juice and Liger tonight. So he's my favorite for the evening. I usually pick one. Like when I do my wrestling sessions, I usually pick
Yeah,
one guy and like do like a little mini marathon of their matches. So I think tonight's going to be Juice and Liger. So
very
it'll
tough pick.
be a good night.
Um, so at the end of every podcast, like I mentioned to you earlier, I'd like to read a quote, mental health based or just the time of year. Do you have any closing words you'd like to say to listeners before we wrap up?
More so a notion. Try to treat yourself better. Try to treat other people better. The world does not revolve around us. We are not monoliths. We live in a world with other people. If you can't deal with other people, isolate yourself if that's what you need to do. But when you're out in the world, just understand you don't know what the next person is going through. So just a
Yeah,
kind word. You don't have to go ask them to hear the life story, but just say, hey, are you doing okay today?
yeah,
Just little things like that, and you never know how much it can really impact someone's day.
absolutely agreed, man. Thank you again so much for coming on today, George. It means the world. Been a great guest. Where can we find you on socials?
You can find me on Facebook under George P. Brooks. You can reach Metta Association at area code 214-810-6518. I'm available 24/7, 214-810-6518. If you would like to help us out in terms of our fundraising, we have a Cash App drive that's under $Metta Association. That's METTA Association. And all of your donations are, of course, tax deductible.
Awesome. So today's quote I have is from Mandy Moore, LPC, and basically about the time of year. Holiday season's not exactly easy for everybody. It's not exactly jolly for many of us, especially from us with estranged families or just not having family around for this time of year.
Right.
In dark times and moments, the ability to express gratitude becomes a natural painkiller and needed change in perspective.
Beautiful.
I I really love that last line because I feel so many of us get so comfortable in pain that we forget what it's like to be happy.
Yeah.
We forget that being happy is a possibility, you know. Um, so George, thank you again so much for coming on today's podcast, especially for International Men's Day. For all my listeners, thank you guys so much for your support. Until next time, Be well, and as always, be gentle with yourselves. Much love, guys.